Hi guys, today I'm going to show you how to connect and query a SQL database. First, we will create a dbconfig file to contain the server names and account info. So here I've created another Python file and I'm putting in my variables or my constants. This is where I will put in my server name and my password, which I will then import into my main project and then use these values. Okay, so let me change these values to something meaningful and then we can get started. Okay, so here I've imported my config file in the top line, and in the second line I have imported the pyodbc package or the module that I will be needing to make the connection. So now we're going to set up a connection. Okay, so here we have a basic connection string. I'm specifying the SQL driver. I'm specifying the server name, which all comes from my config file. I'm going to connect to the master database and I'm going to use my user with my password. All of these things are stored in my config file. Okay, so I've created a simple variable to store the select statement that I want to execute against the database. Then I've created a cursor to make the connection and execute the query. So there I've called the execute method with the query in the parentheses. Okay, so now after executing the query, I want to fetch all the rows and put it in another variable, which then becomes a list, because this will return a list. And then I'm going to print out the names. Okay, so let's give this a go and see how it works. So I'm going to run this. And there we go. It connects to my server and it returns the databases that are on that server. Okay, as you can see, I've just got AdventureWorks and I just made a blank test data. Okay, so now let's just process this list and return the database names one row on every line. Okay, so let's run that and see what we get. Okay, so there's the first print where it prints the entire list, and this prints each name on its own line. Now you'll notice here I'm using some form of indexing here. So why am I doing that? Well, if you notice, each row comes back as a tuple. Okay, so it's got master and then it's got comma nothing, temp db and so on, comma nothing. So to just print out just the name, I want to use the name and I want the first indexed item, which happens to be 0. So for each row, it must display just the first one. So it will just return master. If I didn't do that, if I took that out, I would basically get this whole tuple, each tuple on a line. I'll show you what that looks like. See, now you get a tuple on a line. Okay, so I only want the actual name, so I use the first indexed item, which is 0. And there you go. Right, guys, that's the tutorial for today. The basics of making a connection and getting data from SQL Server. Have a great day. Cheers.